Girl sees unconscious millionaire being attacked by flies, so she does this. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The midday sun punished the asphalt of the downtown square in Oak Ridge when Lily noticed the man collapsed on the wooden bench. Her small, dirty hands clutched a piece of bread she had gotten from the corner bakery, but the sight of the grey-haired gentleman in a crumpled suit made her completely forget the hunger she had felt for hours. Flies buzzed around the man's pale face, landing on his sweaty forehead and at the corners of his half-open mouth. Lily, at 4 years old and wearing a torn t-shirt that had once been pink, approached slowly. She had learned from her grandma Rose that sick people needed care, even if you didn't know them. She murmured for the flies to go away, shooing the insects with delicate movements of her little hands. The man's breathing was ragged, as if each inhale was an immense effort. Lily sat on the ground next to the bench, watching the stranger intently, who seemed to be sleeping with his eyes half open. Arthur Blackwell, 68, owner of Blackwell Mining, had left his last meeting with a chest pain that grew with each passing minute. He had tried to reach his car, but his legs had given out halfway there. The park bench was his only option before everything went dark. When he regained consciousness, the first thing he saw were the brown eyes of a child watching him. With genuine concern, Lily had remained there for nearly an hour, swatting away flies and shielding him from the sun with her own shadow. She asked in her thin voice, tinkling like a little bell in the warm afternoon breeze, if he was okay now. Arthur tried to sit up, feeling his head spin. His shirt was soaked with sweat, and he noticed that some important papers had fallen from his briefcase. The girl had carefully gathered them and placed them under a rock so they wouldn't blow away. He managed to say thank you, still confused, and asked if she had been there the whole time. Lily simply replied that she stayed. Grandma Rose used to say, "You can't leave sick people alone because flies like people who can't move." Arthur looked at the child more closely. Her clothes were dirty and patched, her brown hair tousled by the wind, but there was something in her eyes that touched him deeply, a natural kindness he hadn't seen in a long time in the business world. He reached for his wallet and pulled out a few bills, telling her to take it as a thank you. Lily looked at the money and shook her head, saying it wasn't necessary. Sick people need help, not payment. The response stunned Arthur. In 45 years of his business career, he had never met anyone who refused money for doing good, especially not someone who clearly needed it. He asked her name, putting the bills back in his wallet. She told him her name was Lily and asked for his. He replied, Arthur Blackwell. He paused, still feeling weak, and asked if she lived nearby. She said she lived on the street, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Ever since Grandma Rose went away, the simplicity of her answer hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. This child, who had just saved his life, was homeless. Meanwhile, he owned a mansion with 12 rooms that stood empty most of the time. He asked Lily why she said he looked like her grandmother when he was sleeping. She explained it was because he slept with his eyes open, mimicking the expression she had seen. Grandma Rose did that before she went away forever. Her eyes would stay open, but she couldn't see anything. A chill ran down Arthur's spine. His own mother had passed away in the exact same way from heart problems. Could it be that these frequent fainting spells he'd been having weren't just stress, as his private doctors claimed? He asked her how many times she had seen this happen. With her grandma, a few times before she went away. With him, this was the 3rd time she had seen him sleeping like that here. 3rd time? Arthur frowned. He didn't remember fainting in this spot before. Lily explained that he sometimes came and sat on this bench. Then he would get quiet, breathing slowly, with his eyes half open. She thought he liked to pretend he was sleeping so people wouldn't bother him. The revelation was like a bucket of cold water. Arthur realized he had been having episodes of losing consciousness for weeks, maybe months, without even noticing. The doctors he paid generously had been treating his symptoms with anxiety and stress medication, but perhaps they were ignoring something far more serious. Just then, Vince, 45, approached with heavy steps. As the informal leader of a group of recyclable collectors, he had watched the scene from afar and didn't like what he saw one bit. He asked Lily what she was doing talking to that rich guy, his voice heavy with suspicion, adding that he'd told her those types only wanted to take advantage of kids. Lily replied that he was sick and she just helped him, hiding slightly behind the bench. Vince looked at Arthur with disdain, asking what he wanted with the girl and if he was offering her candy. Arthur stood up slowly, still feeling dizzy. He explained that he was just thanking her for her help, that he had felt unwell and she had stayed to look after him. Vince laughed bitterly at the words "look after" and told Lily to come over, that he didn't want her near that guy. The tension in the air was palpable. Arthur realized his presence was causing trouble for the girl who had just saved him. At the same time, he couldn't stop thinking about her observation about his fainting spells. He needed to find a different doctor, someone not accustomed to his money and status. He said her name softly, thanking her one more time and telling her he was leaving now, but asked if she had a safe place to sleep. She lied that she did, not wanting to worry him. Arthur knew it was a lie, but he also sensed that insisting would only create more problems. He took a business card from his pocket and discreetly placed it under the rock where Lily had secured his papers, whispering that if she needed anything at all, the card had his number. Vince continued to watch his every move, ready to intervene. Arthur walked away slowly, looking back one last time. Lily gave a timid wave, and he felt a pang in his chest that had nothing to do with his heart condition. As he walked toward his car, a black BMW parked on the other side of the square. Arthur made two decisions that would change his life forever. He would see a cardiologist at the public hospital the next morning, and he would find a way to help Lily, even if it meant facing hostility from people like Vince. What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, Helen Foster, a 52-year-old social worker, was observing everything from a table at a nearby cafe. She had noticed the strange interaction between the well-dressed man and the homeless child, and was already making mental notes for a deeper investigation. The afternoon in Oak Ridge remained hot and stuffy, but something had irreversibly changed in the lives of all those people. Lily picked up the card Arthur had left, and although she couldn't read, she carefully tucked it into the pocket of her torn t-shirt. She couldn't imagine that this small piece of paper would be the key to discoveries that would shake not only Arthur's life, but also reveal secrets some people would do anything to keep hidden. The next morning, Arthur arrived at Oak Ridge City Hospital at 6 o'clock, before the sun had fully risen over the mountains surrounding the city. He hadn't slept all night, tormented by Lily's words about sleeping with his eyes open and by memories of his mother's passing. Dr. David Miller, a 43-year-old cardiologist who had been working in the public system for 15 years, received Arthur with curiosity. It wasn't common to see well-dressed businessmen seeking care there, especially without an appointment and with such urgency. Dr. Miller asked Mr. Blackwell why he was seeking treatment there, given that he had private insurance. Arthur replied that he needed an honest opinion as he took off his shirt for the electrocardiogram, explaining that his private doctors might be influenced by other interests. The result of the first test left Dr. Miller visibly concerned. He asked Mr. Blackwell when he last had a cardiac catheterization. Arthur said he never had. His doctors always said it wasn't necessary. Dr. Miller frowned, looking at the tracings on the paper, stating that with an ECG like this, A catheterization should have been ordered long ago, and that he was showing clear signs of advanced heart block. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. He asked what exactly that meant. The doctor explained that his heart wasn't conducting electrical impulses properly, which explained the fainting spells, and depending on the severity, he might need surgery to insert a pacemaker. Arthur left the hospital with an appointment for the catheterization the following week and a prescription for medications he had never taken before. For the first time in decades, he felt vulnerable and dependent, feelings that money had never been able to eliminate. As he drove back to the city center, he couldn't stop thinking about Lily. The girl had identified something that expensive doctors had ignored for months. He decided to look for her in the square where they had met. He found her sitting under a tree, drawing in the dirt with a stick. When she saw him approaching, her eyes lit up, but she quickly looked around nervously, searching for Vince. He said hello to Lily and asked how she was. She replied, "Hi, Arthur," that she was fine, and asked if he had gone to the doctor. The question surprised him. He asked how she knew. She said he looked different, less grey, and that Grandma Rose used to get grey when her heart was bad. Arthur sat on a nearby bench, keeping a respectful distance. He told her she was right, that he went to the doctor and found out he needed heart surgery. She asked if he would get better. He hoped so. He paused, watching her drawing in the dirt, and asked her where she slept at night. The girl stopped drawing and was quiet for a moment. She said different places, sometimes at the bus terminal, sometimes behind the church. He asked if she ate every day. "Sometimes," she replied, her voice getting smaller. "The people at the bakery let her pick up old bread sometimes, and there was a lady who gave her food at her door." Arthur felt his chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't from his heart condition. It was indignation and sadness. He told Lily that he had a very large house with many empty rooms and asked if she would like to stay there while he recovered from his surgery, that she could help him like she did the day before. Lily's eyes widened as she asked if it was for real. He confirmed it was, but first he needed to talk to some people and do things the right way. At that moment, Helen Foster approached, identifying herself as a social worker. She had been observing the conversation from a distance and decided to intervene. She asked to speak with him for a moment, placing herself protectively between Arthur and Lily. Arthur agreed and stood up. Helen led him a few feet away, saying she knew who he was and that Lily was a vulnerable child, and she needed to understand his intentions. Arthur replied directly that his intentions were to help her, that she had saved him yesterday when he fell ill, and he had discovered he had a serious heart condition that she was the only one to notice. Helen understood his gratitude, but explained that homeless children are frequent victims of ill-intentioned people, and even if his intentions were good, she couldn't allow Lily to go to his home without the proper legal procedures. Arthur nodded, understanding her position, and asked what he needed to do. She explained that first, he needed to undergo a psychological evaluation, then his house needed to be inspected, and Lily needed to be heard by a child psychologist to verify if she really wanted this. He asked how long it would take. "A few weeks, maybe a month," she said. Arthur looked at Lily, who was watching the conversation with concern, and asked if she would be on the street during that time. Helen said she would arrange for a spot in a temporary shelter. Lily shouted no, running to them, saying she didn't want to go to the shelter, that she'd been once and didn't like it and wanted to stay with Arthur. Helen knelt to the girl's level, asking if she understood that she didn't know this man well, and that he might not be who she thought he was. Lily said with conviction that he was good, that bad people don't turn grey when they're sick, bad people turn red with anger. The observation left both Arthur and Helen speechless. There was a wisdom in the child's words that came from experiences none of them should have had to live through. Arthur suggested a compromise, asking Helen if he could pay for a hotel for her to stay in while the procedures were finalized, a safe place with supervision where she wouldn't feel trapped. Helen considered the proposal. It would be irregular, but she could consider it if it was a hotel she chose, with staff she knew. Perfect. 2 hours later, Lily was settled in a small family hotel in downtown Oak Ridge, run by Mrs. Gable, 58, who had raised 5 children and had known Helen for years. Arthur paid for 2 weeks in advance and left extra money for clothes and food. Before leaving, he asked Lily if she would like to go with him to the hospital for some tests the next day. She asked if she could, and he said of course if Mrs. Gable and Helen agreed. That night, Arthur arrived home with a strange feeling. His mansion seemed even larger and emptier than usual. He walked through the 12 bedrooms, imagining what it would be like to have a child running through the halls, filling the space with life and laughter. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. Lights were on in his office, and he was sure he had turned them off before leaving. He approached carefully and saw 2 familiar figures. Evan Miles, his accountant of 15 years, and Sebastian Croft, his minority partner. He asked Evan and Sebastian what they were doing there. The 2 men turned, clearly uncomfortable at being caught. Evan forced a smile, saying they needed to review some urgent contracts and Arthur hadn't been answering his phone. Arthur questioned if the contracts couldn't wait until morning. Sebastian explained they were the contracts with Southeast Minerals and the deadline was today. Arthur frowned, saying he had never heard of that company. Evan and Sebastian exchanged a quick glance. Evan said it was a new company, asking if he remembered discussing it in the Friday meeting. Arthur stated that he had fainted during the Friday meeting and didn't remember discussing any company. The silence that followed was heavy and revealing. Arthur realized something was very wrong. Why were his most trusted business partners in his house, alone, messing with contracts he had never seen? He told them to leave the papers there, that he would review them in the morning with a clear head. But Arthur, the deadline. To hell with the deadline, he said firmly. Get out of my house. Now. After they left, Arthur locked all the doors and decided to examine the documents on his desk. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Supply contracts with absurdly high values for a company that, according to a quick internet search, had been created only 6 months ago. For the second time in 2 days, Arthur realized that people he trusted blindly were hiding important truths. The difference was that this time he didn't have a 4-year-old girl to point them out to him. Or maybe he did. He remembered Lily's observation about seeing men in suits talking near his office about hidden papers. Could she have witnessed something related to Evan and Sebastian? He picked up the phone and called the hotel where Lily was staying. He needed to talk to her urgently, but this time it wasn't about heart problems. It was about something potentially much more dangerous. The next morning, Arthur arrived at Mrs. Gable's hotel with an anxiety he hadn't felt in years. Lily was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing a new outfit Mrs. Gable had bought, a light blue dress with small embroidered flowers and white sandals. Her hair was styled in 2 braids, and for the first time since he had met her, she truly looked like a 4-year-old child. He told her she looked very beautiful, smiling genuinely for the first time in days. Lily replied that Aunt Rose said she needed to look pretty to go to the hospital with him, adjusting her dress with small, delicate gestures. During the drive to the hospital, Arthur decided to broach the subject that had kept him awake all night. He asked Lily if she remembered saying she saw men in suits talking about hidden papers near his office. She said yes, that they spoke softly, but she heard well. He asked her to tell him exactly what she heard. Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. Arthur had noticed she did this when she wanted to remember something important. She said the fatter man said they were making a lot of money from the companies that didn't really exist. The other, thinner man said that he was getting suspicious and that maybe they needed to stop for a while. Arthur's blood ran cold. Evan was clearly the fatter man, and Sebastian the thinner one. He asked if there was anything else. She said the fat one said if he found out, they would say he knew everything from the beginning, and the thin one laughed and said nobody would believe he didn't know. Arthur had to pull the car over. His hands were shaking as he processed the information. Not only were Evan and Sebastian stealing from his company, but they also had a plan to frame him if they were discovered. Lily asked if he was okay, that he had turned grey again. He said he was fine, just needed to think a little. He took several deep breaths and asked Lily if she had told anyone else. She said no, she only mentioned it because he asked about hidden papers and wondered if she had done something wrong. He reassured her she had done nothing wrong, that in fact she had helped him a lot, but that it was important she didn't tell anyone else for now. At the hospital, Dr. Miller received Arthur with a serious expression. The results of the additional tests had arrived, and the situation was more serious than he had expected. He told Mr. Blackwell he needed surgery urgently, that his heart could stop at any moment, and that he had had to admit patients with similar conditions to the emergency room. Arthur asked about the recovery time. At least a month of absolute rest, plus 2 months of limited activities, the doctor replied. Arthur looked at Lily, who was sitting quietly in the chair next to him, flipping through a children's magazine she had found in the waiting room. He asked the doctor if it was possible for the child to stay with him during his recovery, explaining she had a special talent for noticing when someone wasn't well. Dr. Miller looked at Lily for a moment and asked if she was the one who noticed his symptoms. Arthur confirmed it when his private doctors couldn't. The doctor found it interesting, noting that some children have that natural sensitivity. He paused thoughtfully and said that if the social workers allowed it, he saw no medical problem. In fact, it could be beneficial to have someone who notices changes in his condition. 2 hours later, Arthur was admitted for pre-operative preparation, and Lily had insisted on staying with him at the hospital. Helen had allowed it, as long as Mrs. Gable supervised her. It was during the first night that Lily made a discovery that would change everything. She had left the room to get water when she saw Evan and Sebastian talking in low voices in the hallway near the elevator. Evan was saying they couldn't let him come out of the surgery alive, looking around nervously. Sebastian told him to calm down, that it didn't have to be so drastic. It was enough to ensure he was incapacitated for a few months, long enough to finalize the transfer of funds. Evan asked how they would do that. Sebastian said he knew the anesthesiologist, and for the right price, he could ensure some complications during the operation. Lily hid behind a coffee machine, her heart pounding in her small chest. Even at 4, she understood that those men wanted to hurt Arthur on purpose. She waited until they moved away and ran back to the room, where Arthur was sleeping, connected to several machines monitoring his heart. She whispered his name, shaking him gently, telling him to wake up. He asked what was wrong, if she was sick. She said no, but he would be if he didn't listen to what she had heard. Arthur sat up in bed, immediately alert. Lily told him everything she had overheard, with a wealth of detail that impressed even herself. She concluded that they wanted him to get very sick in the surgery, that the fat man had talked about making sure he didn't come out alive. The fear that took hold of Arthur was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't fear of death, but fear of leaving Lily alone again, vulnerable to people like Vince, or worse. He asked Lily to promise him something. If anything happened to him, she would find Helen. She replied with surprising determination that nothing would happen to him, that she wouldn't let it. He asked what she meant. She said she would stay there, watching to make sure no one hurt him, just like she did in the square. Arthur felt his eyes well up with tears. This child, who had absolutely nothing in the world, was willing to protect him with her own life. He said no, that it was too dangerous, and they would do something different. Arthur picked up the phone and called Dr. Miller, telling him he needed to transfer his surgery to another hospital, that it was an emergency. Dr. Miller explained that his surgery was scheduled for tomorrow and any transfer would be risky. Arthur countered that it was riskier than having people trying to harm him during the operation. There was silence on the other end of the line before the doctor asked what he was talking about. Arthur told him everything Lily had heard. Dr. Miller was shocked, but also skeptical, pointing out that she was a 4-year-old child and might have misunderstood. Arthur insisted that this child had identified his heart problem when trained doctors couldn't, that she had an extraordinary capacity for observation, and he wasn't going to bet his life against her perception. After a long discussion, Dr. Miller agreed to transfer the surgery to a hospital in a bigger city where he had trusted colleagues, but it would mean postponing the operation for at least a week. Arthur said he could handle another week, but he needed to take care of some things first. The next morning, while they awaited the transfer, Arthur made a decision that would surprise everyone. He called Robert Vance, a criminal lawyer he had met in a business course years ago. He told Robert he needed him to investigate 2 men who worked for him, that he suspected they were embezzling money from the company. Robert asked if he was sure that this kind of investigation could destroy personal relationships. Arthur was sure and added that they might have tried to harm him physically as well. Over the next 3 days, while Arthur was monitored at the Oak Ridge Hospital awaiting transfer, Robert worked discreetly to gather evidence. He discovered that Southeast Minerals was just one of 6 shell companies created by Evan and Sebastian over the past 2 years. The embezzled amount was close to $2 million. During a visit, Robert told Arthur he had discovered something that might interest him. Evan kept detailed records of all the irregular transactions. Arthur asked why he would do that, apparently as insurance against Sebastian. If he were ever discovered, he could shift all the blame to his partner and present himself as a victim. Arthur asked if that helped or hurt him. Robert said it helped him enormously because the records clearly showed that all the approvals with his signature were forged, and there were even notes from Evan on how to imitate his handwriting. At that moment, Lily, who was drawing in a notebook Mrs. Gable had brought, looked up and said that those men were outside again. Arthur and Robert looked out the window and saw Evan and Sebastian talking to a man in a white coat in the hospital parking lot. Arthur muttered that it was the anesthesiologist, that they still thought he was having the surgery here. It was then that Robert had a brilliant idea. He asked Arthur what if they let them think their plan had worked. Arthur asked what he meant. Robert suggested they pretend he had complications and was in serious condition, while he finished gathering all the necessary evidence to incriminate them definitively. Arthur looked at Lily, who had gone back to her drawing but was clearly listening to the whole conversation. He said it was risky. Robert replied that it was less risky than letting them free to try again. Lily stopped drawing and looked directly at Arthur, saying that sometimes, to catch bad people, you have to be smarter than them. That's what Grandma Rose used to say. That night, the Oak Ridge Hospital announced that Arthur Blackwell had suffered serious complications during preoperative tests and was in critical condition in the ICU, receiving no visitors. In reality, he had been discreetly transferred to the other city under a false identity, where he would be operated on safely. But Evan and Sebastian didn't know that, and Robert was counting on exactly that ignorance to get the final evidence he needed to destroy them completely. 3 weeks after the successful surgery, Arthur returned to Oak Ridge with a perfectly functioning pacemaker and a heart stronger than it had been in years. Lily had not left his side during the entire recovery period, impressing doctors and nurses with her dedication and ability to notice the slightest changes in his health status. Dr. Henry Sanford, the cardiologist, who performed the surgery, had joked that she was better than their monitoring equipment, that whenever something was changing in his vital signs, she noticed it before the machines did. But while Arthur was recovering, Robert had been working tirelessly in Oak Ridge. The false news about Arthur's critical condition had worked perfectly. Evan and Sebastian, believing their plan had succeeded, began to accelerate the final transfer of the embezzled funds. Robert explained during a meeting in the hospital room that they got too greedy, that thinking he was incapacitated, they started moving even larger amounts, and he had managed to track 4 more shell companies they didn't know about. Arthur asked for the total, still recovering from surgery, but with a clearer mind than ever. Almost $6 million, Robert said. They were preparing to flee the country. Lily, sitting in a chair next to the bed, drew silently while listening to the conversation. Her drawings had evolved during the weeks in the hospital. Now they were not just loose figures, but complete scenes with surprising details for a 4-year-old. Robert asked Lily if he could see her drawings. She proudly showed him the notebook Mrs. Gable had brought. The pages were filled with drawings of the men in suits in different situations, talking near Arthur's company building, handing papers to other men, and even a detailed scene from the hospital where they were talking to the doctor in the white coat. Robert murmured, "My God." She documented everything visually. Lily explained naturally that she drew what she saw, that Grandma Rose said drawing helps you not to forget important things. Robert examined the drawings more closely and made a startling discovery. In one of the drawings, Lily had captured Evan handing an envelope to a man Robert recognized. Immediately, Chief Brody of the Oak Ridge Police Department. Robert showed the drawing to Arthur, saying they had a bigger problem than they thought, that if Evan was bribing the chief, their investigation could be compromised. Arthur studied the drawing, impressed with the level of detail Lily had managed to capture. He asked her when she saw it. "A week ago," she said, "before coming here. They were at the cafe near the square where they met." Arthur asked Robert what they should do now. Robert said they needed to take everything to the FBI, that this was no longer a simple case of corporate embezzlement. That night, while Robert organized all the documentation to hand over to the federal authorities, Arthur had a serious conversation with Helen, who had come to visit them at the hospital. He told Helen he wanted to officially adopt Lily, that she had saved his life twice, and he couldn't imagine his life without her. Helen asked if he understood that adoption wasn't about gratitude, that it was a lifelong commitment. Arthur understood perfectly, saying it wasn't just gratitude, but genuine love, that this girl had taught him what it means to care for someone unconditionally. Helen watched Lily, who had fallen asleep in an armchair next to Arthur's bed, holding one of her drawings. She asked if he had talked to her about it yet. He said not yet, that he wanted to be sure it would be legally possible. Helen replied that he had passed all the psychological evaluations. His house was approved in the inspection, and frankly, she had never seen a child so attached to someone as Lily was to him. She paused, smiling softly, and said she thought they could start the official process. The next day, something unexpected happened. Vince showed up at the hospital, visibly agitated and demanding to see Lily. He aggressively asked the receptionist where the girl was, that he knew she was there with that rich guy. The head nurse, Nurse Jenkins, a 55-year-old woman who had grown very fond of Lily, did not allow him to go up. She told him that visits needed to be authorized by the family. Vince scoffed at the word family, yelling that the girl had no family, and he had been taking care of her for months. Nurse Jenkins raised an eyebrow, questioning if letting a child sleep on the street was taking care of her. Vince became furious, yelling that she didn't understand anything, that he protected her from the perverts who showed up offering housing like the guy upstairs. The argument became so heated that hospital security was called. Vince was forcibly removed, but not before shouting threats about taking the girl back to where she belongs. When Arthur learned of the incident, his concern was immediate. He asked Robert if Vince could have any legal rights over Lily. Robert explained that theoretically, no, he wasn't a relative or legal guardian, but he could try. To claim he cared for her and question his suitability as an adoptive father based on social differences, advanced age, or lack of experience with children, noting that unfortunately, prejudice still influences some court decisions. It was at that moment that Lily woke from her nap and, sensing the tension in the room, asked a question that silenced everyone. "Did Vince come here?" Arthur asked how she knew. She said she smelled cheap liquor and cigarettes in the elevator and heard him yelling downstairs. She paused, seeming older than her 4 years, and said he was mad because he thinks she chose Arthur over him. Robert, genuinely curious, asked if she did choose. "Of course she did," Lily replied as if it were obvious. "Vince only yelled at her and said she would cause trouble. Arthur talked with her and listened to what she had to say. Arthur gently asked Lily how she would feel if he could be her real dad, not just a friend, but her father forever." Lily's eyes lit up in a way Arthur had never seen before. She asked if it was for real, forever, forever. She asked if she could call him Daddy. He said she could call him whatever she wanted. Lily ran to hug him, and Arthur felt his heart, now strengthened by the pacemaker, overflow with a happiness he had never experienced. 2 days later, when they were finally discharged from the hospital, a surprise awaited them. Evan and Sebastian were in the hospital lobby, accompanied by 2 men Arthur didn't recognize. Evan exclaimed with false relief that thank God he was okay, that they heard he had been very ill. Arthur responded coldly that he was great, keeping Lily behind him. Sebastian said they needed to talk, that some problems had come up at the company that required his urgent signature. Arthur asked what kind of problems. "Contractual issues," Sebastian said. "Nothing major, but they could lead to fines if not resolved quickly." Arthur realized they were trying to get him to sign more fraudulent documents, probably to complete the transfer of the remaining funds. He told them to leave the documents in his office, that he would review everything calmly when he was fully recovered. Evan insisted that they were urgent matters. "I said I'll look at it later," Arthur cut him off, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even himself. After they walked away, Lily tugged on Arthur's shirt. "Daddy," she said, using the term for the first time. "Those men smell like lies." He asked what she meant. She said Grandma Rose used to say that when people lie a lot, they get a sour smell, like spoiled milk. Arthur smiled, realizing that even at 4, Lily possessed an intuition for detecting dishonesty that many adults would never develop. That night, in his mansion, which would now officially be Lily's home, Arthur received a call from Robert that would change everything. Robert told him the FBI was launching the operation the next morning, that Evan, Sebastian, and 12 other people would be arrested for forming a money laundering scheme and active corruption. Arthur asked about his own situation. Robert assured him he was completely in the clear, that the evidence clearly showed he was a victim, not an accomplice. Arthur looked at Lily, who was organizing her few belongings in the room he had prepared for her. The largest room in the house, overlooking the garden and decorated with everything a child could desire. He told Robert there was something he needed to say, that if it weren't for Lily, he would never have discovered any of this, that she had saved him in more ways than he could count. Robert asked if he could ask a personal question. Of course. Did he really believe that a 4-year-old child noticed all of this on her own, or did he think there might be something more to it? Arthur paused, watching Lily hang her drawings on the bedroom wall. He told Robert that 3 weeks ago he would have said it was impossible, but now he believed that some people are born with special gifts, and Lily is one of those people. What Arthur didn't know was that at that very moment, Evan was preparing one last, desperate move to frame Arthur, using Lily as a key piece in a plan that would put them both in mortal danger. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.